Chilling tales for dark nights.
The Wegner, written by Eric Dodd, performed by Joe Walz. There's decent money to be made in storage auctions. At least there used to be before the reality TV shows made everyone think they could get rich quick. The unit was crammed with old boxes and some furniture. The furniture caught my eye. A refinished vintage desk from the 50s or 60s could sell for quite a bit. The crowd was sparse, and I won the auction for a steal. After the auction, I drove the box truck back to my warehouse and began unloading it. My warehouse was a small prefab metal building with a roll-up garage door that my father had used, when he was alive, to store junk in, and to dream about building race cars. To my knowledge, no car had ever graced the concrete floor of that building. I lived with my roommate Randall. We met in 8th grade. I hated his guts. He was fat, shy, weird, and worst of all, he was really smart. I soon came to appreciate Randall's intelligence when that mean old bitch, Mrs. Catlett, assigned me to be his lab partner. I got an A for the first time in years. My parents were killed by a drunk driver midway through my freshman year at the local community college. They left me their big old sprawling farmhouse, money to bury them, and not much else. Randall suggested I rent out some of the rooms, specifically to him. I understood that he meant it as a favor to me, and at the time, I needed both the money and the company. At 15, Randall started making money building websites. He told me once, "On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, or that you're 15. I learned a lot from him by pure osmosis, particularly in research. Being able to track down both prior sales and potential buyers is a valuable skill in my line of work. Randall, however, moved on from building simple websites to programming full web-based applications. By the time he moved in, he was earning enough that he could pay all of his bills and have plenty of money left over for his many hobbies. When I first visited Randall's house in 8th grade, I was astonished by his baseball card collection. He had thousands meticulously arranged and cataloged, and it seemed that he had every stat memorized. As the years passed, he moved from collection to collection. About a year after he moved in, Randall stumbled across what was soon to be his new obsession: mechanical keyboards. He bought us both Corsair gaming boards, then promptly threw them in the trash and replaced them with boards from a Taiwanese outfit named Ducky, complete with fancy LED lighting patterns. I was happy with my Ducky Shine board. The keys felt great, though the clicks were a little annoying. When Randall wasn't coding, he was shopping for increasingly rare keyboards. He had taken over the dining room as his work area. He set up tall shelves that he filled with boards, each labeled and cleaned, and in some cases, meticulously wrapped in protective plastic. Randall claimed that he had purchased his endgame board, a strangely shaped aluminum beast he purchased from someone in Korea, after a month of tedious and sometimes heated negotiation. When it arrived, I was astonished to see that it wasn't even finished. "You spent how much on that?" I asked. $800, he replied. $800, for some metal plates and a bunch of parts. "Yeah, plus I had to buy the keycaps, so maybe $1,000 total." $200 for some plastic keycaps? I'm definitely not charging you enough for rent. When I loaded the box truck at the storage auction, I knew I had hit pay dirt with the furniture. The unit had contained a beautiful oak desk, a padded oak and leather rolling office chair, and some desk lamps. There were also quite a few cardboard boxes of papers, books, and various other junk. In the back corner of the unit, covered in cloth, was a heavy wooden crate, its lid nailed shut. The crate was what interested me most. The file cabinets had papers and files, but I couldn't open the crate without a crowbar. The furniture alone would double my investment in the unit, but sealed wooden crates typically meant something important, something of value. Lifting with my legs and not with my back, with liberal use of my hand truck, I leveraged the boxes and the furniture out of the truck and into my warehouse. Randall had spray-painted that hand truck hot pink one weekend. "I thought your dolly needed a new dress," he said, and laughed until his glasses fogged up. The jerk. Finally, I was alone with my prize. I carefully slotted the crowbar and pried the lid off the wooden crate. Inside lay a large chunk of foam packing material around a dark piece of equipment. I removed the packing material, carefully pulled the device from its crate, and placed it on the desk. The device appeared to be quite possibly the world's ugliest computer. Its case was a dark reddish-brown, with thick angles of metal bent over and around a tiny glass tube screen. The screen shared the front of the case with a floppy bay, along with several other odd ports. Just below the monitor was a label, white letters stark against black Dymo embossing tape. Wegner 1. The keyboard, packed in its own wrapping of foam, was also red-brown, in a tall case nearly 3 inches thick. It felt as if it might be made of steel, and had a heft like a murder weapon. I texted Randall that I had found an old computer, and he came to the warehouse at a run. His jaw dropped when he saw the ugly old thing, and he spent the next 10 minutes caressing it and cooing at it like I'd brought him a kitten. "Gonna turn it on?" I asked. Randall looked at me in horror. "Are you nuts? The capacitors in this thing have to be over 30 years old. I'll have to test every single one with a meter, and even then, I don't know if I'd dare trying it. The keyboard, though, has an RJ11 connector. I have a USB adapter for that," he said, and got the faraway look in his eye that nerds get when they're solving nerd problems. "I'll leave you alone with your new girlfriend," I said. "I'm starved, and I have dust all up my sinuses." While I showered, Randall carted the Wegner, as he started calling it, into the house, and set it up on the dining room table. Realizing we had no food in the house, and we were critically low on beer, I went to the market to pick up deli sandwiches and beverages. It was late when I got back. Randall was still at the table looking at the Wegner keyboard through magnifying lenses strapped to his forehead. He looked up at me and sighed. "I can't figure out how these switches work, man. I thought they might be Hall effect at first, but they've got this weird chip next to each of them. They feel great, though, like a Topper board with tight buckling springs." He began reassembling the board. "I got it to work with the USB adapter, too. Want to try it?" Randall flipped the board back onto its base and connected it to his PC. I leaned over the board, the angle awkward, and started touching the keys. "Ow!" I said as a short static shock jolted my fingers. I recoiled and looked at Randall. "The damn thing has a short." "Yeah, it did that to me once too. No idea why. Should be grounded over USB. "Well, come on, don't be a sissy, try it out," Randall said. I lay my fingers on the board again. The Wegner's keys were weirdly slick, and the caps felt slightly oily to my touch. "Is this thing buzzing when I hit a key?" I asked. "That's what I can't figure out, dude. I looked all over the top of the keyboard, and there's nothing that might make it buzz like that. The case is welded together at the bottom, so I can't get to the underside of the keyboard without breaking it. I kinda like it, though," Randall said. "It's like a mini massage for my fingers." I settled down at my own computer, cracked a beer, and started hunting down the provenance for our ugly new friend. I sent a few emails to some friends in the business and posted some questions on some vintage computing message boards. My first search result for Wegner returned Wikipedia articles about Dr. Meinrad Wegner. He was a German rocket scientist who came to America, perhaps unwillingly, at the end of World War II. A footnote led me to his son, a polymath who graduated from MIT with 4 degrees at 20 years old, then disappeared from the public eye for a decade. In 1982, at Comdex in Atlantic City, Ernst Wegner unveiled the Wegner 1, a PC clone that he claimed would change the world. Wegner's announcement was met with some skepticism, but mostly apathy. After Comdex, the trail went cold, with no other articles about Wegner or his computer. The next day, I sorted through the furniture and boxes that came from Wegner's office. The drawers in the oak desk were locked, but the lock didn't stand up to a screwdriver and a hammer. The first drawer shrieked horribly when I pulled it open. Inside lay an assortment of decades-old office supplies. With the first drawer opened, I could then pull out the larger bottom drawer. Bingo, I said to myself. A dozen black paperback notebooks lay inside, each dated and labeled E. Wegner, Laboratory Notes. I pulled out the notebooks and started flipping through them. At first, it was hard to read Wegner's spidery, cramped handwriting. The first notebook, which appeared to be the earliest, dated 1968, was filled with terse, almost grudging notes about Wegner's daily work. He had been recruited straight out of college to work at a small independent laboratory in the outskirts of Massachusetts. At first, he was given menial fact-checking assignments, long and tedious mathematical calculations performed by hand and slide rule. Wegner's frustration with these assignments was apparent in his notes. In the margins, though, he had drawn several sketches of electrical circuits. Wegner appeared to have a breakthrough midway through 1969. His cramped handwriting became more expansive, and his ideas more fluid as written on the page. He began to receive greater access to the projects upon which he had been working, and by the end of the notebook, so did I. The small independent laboratory was in truth a government operation, requiring both top-secret and extremely prejudiced need-to-know clearance, operating at arm's length to provide plausible deniability. The height of Cold War paranoia had combined with the heady days of the Summer of Love to produce strange offspring indeed. By 1970, Wegner was involved in dozens of projects, each more bizarre than the last. Remote sensing, life extension, astral projection. Wegner devoured every subject before him and combined them in ways that were the true manifestation of his genius. Tantric meditation based upon quantum physics, mathematical formula derived during deeply ritualized seances while megadosing on lysergic acid derivatives he developed during sensory deprivation. In one of these fugue states, he wrote, he became convinced of the possibility of imprinting, copying thoughts from one person to another. The military, of course, latched onto the idea as a perfect interrogation method. What better way to question an enemy combatant than to read that enemy's thoughts? By this point, I was hooked. I had settled on a creaking wooden office chair, likely Wegner's, with a beer, 2 ham sandwiches, and a stack of notebooks. I went to the kitchen for more beer and a bag of chips. Randall was banging away at his weird old keyboard, headphones on, monitor glare whiting out his glasses. As I passed, I asked if he wanted a beer. He said nothing, lost in whatever code he was working on. I shrugged and went back to the notebooks. Somewhere between 1974 and 1978, Wegner had made a major breakthrough. He was still devouring wildly disparate fields of both science and mythology with equal gusto, incorporating Vaudoon ceremonies with computer science. He wrote that he felt all knowledge in the universe was already known to the universe, and so could be divined or teased out of the mind of God. He theorized that ritual and supplication to higher powers were equally valid to proper scientific experimentation, and by 1975 had formalized divination rituals designed to find specific answers to extremely difficult logical calculations. Wegner became convinced that he was contacting entities that existed outside the universe, and these hyperdimensional entities had access to all knowledge, both past and future. Whether Wegner was actually contacting the spirit world or was simply insane was irrelevant. His efforts paid off. Double-blind trials proved imprinting worked for moods in 1980, and by the following year he had a functional device that could reliably transfer clear thoughts from one person to another, if both were concentrating very hard. The notebook for 1982 was the last, and started with great success. Wegner's lab assistant Anne Bowden successfully received an imprint from a test subject. She was able to document details about the test subject's life and personal history that the test subject had revealed to no one else, including recent memories that the test subject had attempted to suppress while being recorded. Anne, who Wegner had not mentioned in his journals before, soon became prominent in his journals. Wegner noted that after imprinting, Anne seemed more intelligent, often solving difficult problems that had previously been far beyond her skills very quickly. Wegner thought that perhaps imprinting added the recorded subject's intellect to the imprinted subject. It was Anne who persuaded Wegner to leave the lab and to take his invention to the public. Anne told him that imprinting technology would remake the world. Wegner wrote that Anne developed the Wegner 1 PC almost entirely on her own, hand-assembling the case and keyboard in a locked room by herself over a weekend. In an entry dated June of 1982, Wegner wrote that Anne had been trying to convince him that they should leave the laboratory, that the Wegner 1 would change the world. He worried that the government would object, strongly, to their breach of security. Anne suggested they demonstrate the Wegner 1 at Comdex, an upcoming trade show in Atlantic City. The government wouldn't be able to keep their project secret then. On June 27, 1982, Wegner wrote that he planned to propose marriage to Anne. "This will be the happiest day of my life." The notebook was blank after that entry, or so I thought. I flipped through the remaining pages and saw something written on the back of the notebook. "Anne is not Anne. Something else came through. I have to stop them." I should have been worried then. I should have felt the cold tendrils of panic crawling up the base of my neck. Instead, I chuckled at Wegner's madness and went back to the house. I am so sorry for all of you. When I returned to the house, Randall was still working. He didn't acknowledge me as I walked past, the loud, clacking keystrokes echoing off the ceilings and floorboards of the old farmhouse. The original Wegner 1 now sat on the table amidst a tangle of network cables. "Decided to hook it up anyway?" I said, walking past. No response. I stopped and nudged Randall's chair with my foot. "I'm running out for some dinner. Want anything?" Randall's fingers scrabbled across the board, clicking and tapping, illuminated by the blue glow of the screens like pale spiders. I grabbed him by the shoulder and gently shook. "Wake up, man. Dinner?" The clacking stopped, and his hand shot up to grasp mine at the wrist. For an instant, I felt overwhelming, disorienting revulsion. I recoiled slightly, pulling my hand away from his shoulder. He released his grip on my arm. His head slowly swiveled toward me, eyes hidden behind twin reflecting lenses. "No," he said, voice clicking in his throat. He turned back to the screens, hands again a flurry of motion. "Jesus, dude, whatever," I said, rubbing my wrist. He had really squeezed hard. Randall could be single-minded when he was deep in code, but I had never seen him like that. I shook my head, still rubbing my arm, and left. I checked emails while waiting for my food and saw my message board posts had received quite a bit of attention. The busy geeks on the Vintage Computing Forum had found more information about Ernst Wegner. "Wegner didn't just have a nervous breakdown," the commenter wrote. "He went absolutely bonkers crazy. It was all over the local news. The neighbors heard shouting and called the cops. When the cops broke down the door, they found his girlfriend dead on the floor. He'd stabbed her 12 times with a butcher knife, doused her in kerosene, then bashed her head in with the jug. In the police report, one of the cops stated Wegner was trying to do some satanic ritual with her body. He had her inside some circle he'd painted in blood with markings all around it, and just before the cops tackled him, threw a match. Took firefighters hours to put out the blaze. Wegner was only in his cell for a few hours. A bunch of spooks showed up in black panel vans at the county jail. They shoved papers and guns in the cops' faces and had Wegner bundled up and gone before anyone could say no." Other commenters went on to claim this was proof of a government cover-up. Then the thread devolved into name-calling and political rants. The rapid-fire clacking was audible from outside the house. Old movie monster skeletons rattling their bones as I walked into the front door. There was a smell in the house then, an acrid scent of ozone and burned hair. The Wegner 1 buzzed angrily on the table, deep orange light flickering from inside its case. Randall was a darker shape in the dim dining room, face a smear with twin sparks for eyes. That was the first time I felt the fear that I had become so familiar with. My hand trembled slightly as I fumbled the light switch on. Randall had always been a little overweight, even though he was tall, topping out at 260 pounds. The thing at the keyboard, still hammering away at the keys, could not have weighed more than 100 pounds. Even from the doorway, I could feel an awful burning heat radiating from him. Skin hung in folds from scrawny, emaciated arms sticking out of a shirt a half-dozen sizes too large. And his hands, his fingers, were black and red, shot through with white that I realized might have been bone. Without thinking, I ran forward to push him away from the keyboard. "Randall!" I shouted. As I grabbed his shoulder, I could feel the bones churning beneath my grip, and some dim part of my mind noted that long drifts of his hair had fallen all around him. The typing stopped. Randall's head turned to me, mouth working as if it had forgotten how to shape words. "Do not interfere," he said. Those awful hands came up so fast. I had never seen Randall move that fast, their heat burning my skin through my shirt. Randall was standing somehow, and I was lifted up, and for a moment I could only think how his hands smelled like the meat department at the grocery store. Then he shoved, and I flew across the room to slam into the display case. Pain exploded through my shoulder and arm, and the world blurred for a moment. Randall was standing over me. I could smell the stink of him and hear his fingers clicking together even without a keyboard. "The path is now open," he said. "We arrive. Rejoice." The box truck was gone when I woke. Randall was gone. The Wegner was gone, save for a charge spot on the table and some melted Ethernet cables. The rest of the computers in the house, all gone. Wegner's notebooks and filing cabinets were missing. My phone was broken, crushed against the corner of the display case. When I returned from the hospital, arm in a sling, I borrowed a friend's laptop and checked my email. All of the message board emails were missing. I checked the boards, and my posts were also missing. I checked Wikipedia, only to find entries for both Wegners, junior and senior, missing. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from my cable internet provider. My account had been suspended for sending large amounts of suspicious data to millions of hosts on the internet.
For me, life was a whirlwind of lights and smoke, music and men. I lived in a beaten-up shanty close to North Edsa, crammed in a closet-like room with a bunch of other women. We slept on mats on the dirt floor and shared the space with mange-infested dogs, flea-bitten cats, and cockroaches. My wardrobe consisted mostly of skimpy skirts, tank tops, and the cheapest high heels you can buy in Quiapo. After a hard night at the bars of dancing and exposing myself, sometimes spending time in a back room with a heavily drunken man and my eyes like a dead fish staring at the ceiling, I earned enough cash to go to the Ukai Ukai thrift shop. The weather in Manila had become chilly at night, and I needed a sweater. I took a walk down a few streets that smelled of garbage and human urine mixed with the smog from jeepneys, tricycles, and trucks that never ended. It wasn't long before I found a street lined with second-hand clothes, undoubtedly from American charities, but somehow grabbed by greedy merchants looking to make extra pesos. The sweater was like a pearl in murky waters as it lay neatly on top of a bunch of tattered, motley clothes. Wondering how someone had not yet bought it, I quickly took it in my hands and studied the richness of the fabric. It was as soft as a rabbit's fur, and just as warm. Across its front was a large pouch where you could put your hands into for warmth, and that's where I found the note on a crumpled piece of yellow paper. It smelled like the section of a library where ancient books could be found, dust and dank. On the paper were scrawled the words, "Where? 67th Banwi Street. Pay? 1,000 pesos a night. Job. Lie on the bed from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. Keep your eyes shut. Never open them. Past 3, your money will be on the dresser." Banwi Street. The note did not say which city, but I recalled the name of a street in Quezon that one of my roommates used to visit for a client. It was where the more upper-class people lived. I stuffed the note in my pocket and paid the merchant. Only 30 pesos. Not bad. The sweater was wonderful on my skin and made me glow like a snowflake. I felt like one of those young starlets on our local Capamilia TV network. And in my pocket was the promise of an easy, high-paying job. Those came so rarely. I must admit that even if the job seemed sketchy, the promise of 1,000 pesos a night was tempting. I could get myself out of my situation, maybe go to college, find a real job. After a lot of asking and searching, I found the house that night. 67th Banwi Street was in desolate condition, even if it was in an upper-class neighborhood. A single-story house surrounded by a short wire fence. Yard unkempt, weeds stuck up like tousled hair. Boards molded loose, shingles chipped, paint faded. Windows cloaked with dust. Still, it was 100 times better than the shanty I slept in. The light of the patio was on as I approached, and when I knocked, the door opened as if ajar. I called hello. No answer. The interior smelled aged and sour, like wet laundry left in the wash for days. I stepped inside, leaving the door slightly open so the light from the patio can illuminate my way. The floor felt as if it might give way beneath my weight. I felt the walls pressing in on me, heavy and damp. The place reminded me of a body they had found in the sewage canal close to where I lived. Bloated and bruised, deteriorated. I passed the dark living room. There was a TV, a battered couch, a coffee table with an ashtray and some empty cans. The room reeked of cat urine and dried feces. No one was there. I attempted to turn on some light switches but found them useless. I turned away and headed down a hallway, noticing a pale light glowing beneath the closed door. I called again. Absolute silence. I clasped the handle and pushed, ignoring the greasy residue it left on my palm. I found a single bed covered in drab sheets, one dresser beside it with a digital clock. It illuminated the time strongly through the darkness. 10:50 p.m. Feeling disturbed, I might have turned away. The house was empty, I admit. I thought the job was just going to be another man looking for a quick fix, but now I was curious. It didn't seem that way, and the uncertainty of it unnerved me. But still, 1,000 pesos was too good to pass. I needed to find out if it were true. I lay on the bed with the note in my hands, facing the glow of the clock. 10:54. I listened. The house made no sound, muffled as if a hand lay over it. I felt afraid but excited. 10:56. My heart throbbed from my chest, through my throat, in my head. I imagined the ticking of a clock tried to match my heart with its beat. 10:59. I shut my eyes. Waited. 11 came. I knew with my eyes closed because the change in the atmosphere was immediate. I was not alone. My eyes were shut, yet I felt it, so close to my face. The minute hairs on my forehead tingled. It breathed, tight, stressed, as if forced to breathe only from its nose. I felt the air warm the area just above my lip. I smelled it. A sour smell like pickled gums. And there was something else. Pungent, thick, sweet. The smell of blood. I resisted the urge to gag. Seconds turned to minutes, and still the presence lingered against my face. My body suffered, paralyzed with fear. I felt every strained breath in, out. Slow, afraid. I felt the slightest itch on my body. Prickles against my legs, bites up my thighs, behind my back and neck. Sweat creeping, crawling, brushing upturned hairs and begging me to scratch and move. I didn't. Bones ached, muscles wept. My heart struggled like a sparrow caught in someone's hands. The presence continued its steady closeness to my face. My forehead glittered with sweat and now began to throb. My nose prickled, twitched. I wondered if it saw that. Even my eyelids sweated, my eyes behind them stiff-shot, scared, hiding behind lids like frightened children in a closet. The smell relented. My lungs resisted its entry, asking for me to turn my head away, escape from such a foul smell, yet I could not. Every part of my body was frozen so long as the thing stared into my face. Never opened them. My hands still clutched the note. As long as I kept my eyes closed, I thought, nothing could happen to me. I analyzed the letter in my mind, repeated those 3 words, never open them. Again, 10 times, uncountable times, steeling myself to start my next move, my first move. I breathed. A long inhale, sourness and the sticky, sickly smell of blood swamped my lungs. I gagged, coughed, and then I turned. I turned away into the bed, curled myself fetal-like, eyes clamped shut like vices, and when I relaxed, I felt it. Still there, a hair's width away from my face. It was hovering, floating. How could the thing have moved with me? I did not feel any weight on the bed during the transition, any sign to suggest that it had crawled over me, moved beside me, refocused itself against my face. I allowed a few minutes to pass before I tried again. I moved slowly, deliberately, sensing it against my face. And it moved with mine, smoothly, soundlessly, until I was completely on my back. My face, eyes shut, staring straight up, the thing looking down upon me relentlessly. I grimaced, knit my brows, sweated. I wanted to bat at it, but I could not. I was too afraid. All I could clutch onto was the promise that this could end. I waited, ached, sweated, prayed. It stayed with me, always there. I could not sleep. 3 a.m. The digital clock alarmed, and just like that, I was released. The thing that had looked on at my face for 4 hours was gone. I did not immediately open my eyes. I waited until the sweat on my brows became cold and dry. I listened to my body unlock one by one, like a warden walking through a prison, releasing the prisoners cell by cell. I could breathe again. My heart pumped bold and strong. I felt my fingers, the warmth on my skin. I yearned to stretch and let life sizzle through every part of me. I opened my eyes. 1,000 pesos lay on the dresser. 1,000 pesos for the horror I had endured. I took it and did not look back as I left. A week had passed since the night I spent there. Although my money was gone now, spent over things I can't even remember, the memories from that night had not. Not a moment went by where I wasn't thinking of the thing that had breathed so close to my face. Could I have been imagining it? Perhaps my fears had been so strong, my mind had created something to justify it. But my senses could not have been tricking me. I smelled it, blood and sour, rank. I felt it. Warm breath on my face. Who had left the money? What was the presence I felt? And the question that caused me the most dread. What would have happened if I had opened my eyes? My return to the house was no longer just for money, but answers. The evening I returned, I noticed that nothing had changed. The only difference from the first time I had been there were the bed sheets, still crumpled from my use. The effervescent light from the clock was resolute, like a statue's stern gaze, almost punishing as I lay on the bed. Just a few seconds before 11 p.m., I shut my eyes. The thing appeared close to my face exactly on the second. This time my fears were replaced by a studious curiosity. I noticed that right before it arrived, I did not sense anyone walk into the room. Its appearance was fluid, soundless, as if it had materialized from thin air. The thick smell of blood and sourness were consistent with the first time. I turned my head slowly left and right, and every movement was mirrored perfectly by it. Like studying yourself in a mirror, your reflection so close to your face, you could fog it with the breath from your nostrils. I dared to do the one thing I had not the last night I was here. I brought my hands up to my face, cautiously, feeling my bones creak beneath the tense muscle and cold skin, the sweat building on my frightened palms and fingers. As my hands reached close, they stopped, protested, hesitated. My heart banged like wild mice in a cage. I grimaced, summoning all my courage, eyes sweating behind the lids, temples pounding. My hands moved again, The unseen presence continued its breathing, steady and undaunted, unmoving. My fingers touched something. I stopped. Every part of my body froze. I could not breathe. The blood on my face swelled as I choked on fear. The breathing from the thing changed. It grew raspy, excited. Its putrid breath hit my face more powerfully. I could not tell my fingers to move. They stayed where they were, paralyzed, touching it. The length of time that passed after I could not recall, my mind too swamped in fear. All I could remember was that at last, the lockdown of my mind had subsided enough for my fingers to try and comprehend what it was touching. Hair. Sticky and cold. My heart banged, my fingers moved slightly. I felt the firmness of a scalp beneath the hair. The thing continued to breathe as if enthused. Somehow I had managed to detach myself from the paralyzing terror of my body, and now I was moving my fingers like a puppeteer would to his marionette. They followed the curve of the scalp, lowered until I felt skin. The skin felt torn and jagged, and the sticky fluid was thicker there. My fingers passed the broken skin, and now I was palpitating what felt like flesh. The flesh of chopped beef parts in the market, sticky and soft. I lowered my hands. My heart thumped so hard I thought I might die of heart failure. I was too scared to continue the investigation. It felt like I had been touching a severed head. 3 a.m. Again, I waited until I was relaxed enough before opening my eyes. Like before, 1,000 pesos lay neatly on the dresser. My hands, still paralyzed from what they had felt earlier, were clean. I thought they might have been soaked in blood, but there was nothing. I ran from the house, terrified. Perhaps a ghost was haunting the building, and I promised never to return, no matter how much I needed the money. But that was a month ago. My roommates and I had taken a turn for the worse. Town officials were cracking down on businesses like the one we worked at and required to show proof that we were tested just to make sure we weren't spreading any diseases. But lab tests require money. The bar managers I worked for were snapping up only those girls who could give him the negative test quickly, and space was limited. In spite of the fears I felt, the promises I had made to never return, the need for money was greater. After all, had nothing bad ever happened to me while I was there? 11 p.m. The demonic presence returned. I grimaced my eyes tight, determined not to let it scare me. I told myself the job was easy. Keep my eyes closed from 11 to 3, and I will be paid handsomely. I suppose I'd gotten used to its presence. For only a few hours into the night, I found myself fighting the urge to sleep. The rhythm of its breathing lulled me. In, out, in, out. Its sour, fetid breath mixed with sickly sweet smell of blood perfuming me to sleep. I tried hard to fight it. I failed, and soon sleep's heavy hand had successfully pressed down on my weary mind. The girl in my dream was pretty. Slim body, short, hair long and straight, as dark as the skies in the province. Eyes deep and shadowy, she watched me as I slept. So close to my face, I could place a hand to her cheek and ask why she was there. "Leave," she whispered. "Leave." Her face grew distorted, and then she started making choking, gagging sounds. I sat up with horror and watched her skin turn to a ghastly blue. Her eyes bulged and turned red. She was trying to scream, say something, but all I could hear were the hoarse, ragged breathing sounds that watched me as I and I was awake. By some miraculous reason, I had not opened my eyes, but the room was filled with the same choking, gasping noises I had heard in my dream. The floor shook as if there were some violent commotion happening in the room with me, and then silence. Only my beating heart banged in my ears. Still, I did not open my eyes, not now. Not until I could hear the alarm so I could safely take the money and leave. But it did not end there. The next sound I heard sickened me more than anything I had ever experienced. A rhythmic, moist sound, like someone carving flesh with a saw. And then dripping. A thump as something heavy hit the floor. I heard footsteps heavy and slow headed my way. Every inch of my body screamed to open my eyes. Run! I was shaking, sweating, so fear-stricken like a bellowing animal held upside down before its throat was slit. The footsteps kept coming. Breathe! Breathe! I couldn't. I needed to run. But I couldn't. I was afraid. I had lasted far too long keeping my eyes closed. I couldn't open them, no matter how insane it sounded. The footsteps stopped. Right next to the bed I lay on. The thing was once more close to my face, breathing, gasping. It felt like my muscles would snap under the tension. My fear was like 1,000 knives angled toward my body, the slightest move threatening to kill me. Minutes stretched on, slowly, cruelly. I wanted out of everything. The room, the need for money, the nights with strangers and terror of it all. Call girl, I wanted out. And then, a blessing like the sun after a typhoon. The sound of the alarm clock. 3 a.m. I opened my eyes and found myself in an empty room. There was nothing there. Nothing on the floor where I had heard someone screaming, their body being carved. The money on the dresser, but it didn't matter. I didn't even grab it. I fled out of the house like a beaten dog. I could not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I sought out some answers to the house I had been visiting. The town captain believed my story that I was sent by a wealthy family to find out if the house was for sale and check if there was any history behind it. Years ago, a wealthy man once lived there. He was quiet and kept to himself, seemed to cause no harm to anyone. Every once in a while, he took in a call girl to keep him company for the night, but many men did the same. Not much to be suspicious about. Until the neighbors smelled something foul coming from his home. They found him in his room with the headless body of a girl on the floor. Who knows how long he had been there with the body? Maybe days. He was standing still, like an upright coffin, and in his outstretched hand was the girl's head. He wouldn't put it down, just held it out, so steady and still, his expression dead. They shot him right there. The captain opened a drawer and drew out a file. This is a photo of the girl they believed was killed. She was an orphan, only 16. Probably did what she did for the money. The other girls who worked with her said she had been with the man 2 other times. It was on the 3rd night when he killed her. Here, take it. She was the same girl from my dream. But what chilled me more and more was the sweater she wore in the photo. White and soft. The same one I had found in the second-hand store with the note in the pocket. I thanked the captain, barely able to let out the words. When I returned to my shanty later that day, I discovered that the white sweater had disappeared from my closet, and so did the note. When I asked my roommates if they had seen or taken it, all I got was the answer, no. I gave up working as a call girl and found a job as a caregiver for an elderly couple. Although the work was hard and slow, I persisted and saved up enough money to start college. Sometimes I passed by the thrift store where I had found the white sweater with the cursed note. I remember the 3 nights I had spent with the dark presence and how insane I had been, returning even after so much fear. For money, for curiosity. That's what a call girl's life did to you. You become jaded to the dangers you repeatedly put yourself into. Sleeping with strangers, potential murderers. Returning for the money and the thrill of it. I tried to stuff the memories into the dark cracks of my mind. Forget it. But still I wondered. What if I had opened my eyes? A few years later, I came upon an article in the news. A small one among a few other murders. They always wrote these stories with such detail, and my blood curdled. The body of a call girl had been found, her head severed. The girl's eyes were wide open.
It's funny how things work. We have giant metal vehicles that fly through the air. We have HD video that you can carry in your pocket. We have music that can be accessed anytime from devices that use touchscreens. But when something like this happens, something so stupid, something so simple, there's nothing to be done. Nothing that can be done, even with our advances. I woke up 3 weeks ago in this place. It's a medium-sized room with concrete walls, floor, and ceiling. In spots, the concrete is stained and cracked. A single light bulb hangs from the ceiling, and sometimes it flickers. It's not a very powerful bulb, but enough to see by. I woke up next to a woman. I didn't recognize her, but that didn't matter. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know how I'd gotten here. There didn't seem to be any doors or windows or openings of any kind, just a concrete box with me and a sleeping woman in it. I woke her up after a few moments of dazed confusion. She didn't scream, which was my worry, and instead asked questions calmly.
"Where are we?"
she asked. I don't know.
"How did I get here?"
I don't know.
"Who are you?"
I smiled. Finally, a question I could answer. "I'm Tom," I said. "Tom Gable. I woke up here just a minute ago, and I was hoping you'd have an idea about it. But since you don't, well, we may as well get acquainted. You know my name. What's yours?" I stuck out my hand. She shook my hand.
"I'm Melissa,"
she replied.
"Melissa Dobbs. Last I remember, I was..."
She froze and creased her eyebrows.
"Did you hear that?"
I listened, but didn't hear anything. I shook my head. "What was it?" I asked.
"It sounded like... I don't know. A thump."
We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening for another noise. There was nothing but silence as long as we sat there. After so long, I just shook my head. "I don't think there's anything there, Melissa," I said. "But if you did hear a sound, that means we're close to the surface."
"The surface?"
she repeated.
"What do you mean, the surface?"
"Well, the way I figure, we're probably underground. Where else would someone keep a concrete box? Another thing I'm wondering is how they even got us in here. It all seems like a dream, you know?" I sighed and leaned my back against the wall. This couldn't be happening, not really.
"I know what you mean,"
Melissa said.
"It just doesn't seem real. This doesn't just happen. This can't just happen.
This time I heard the noise too. It was like a thump, but a squishy thump. Like if you hit an animal with a heavy object. Images of bleeding animals flashed in my mind. Pictures of infants being hit with hammers and baseball bats. I almost jumped, I was so surprised. Why would I think that? That wasn't normal. None of this was normal. This place and that sound and these thoughts. None of this was right.
"Did you?"
"Yeah, I heard it," I interrupted Melissa. I started to ask if she saw things, but she would think I was crazy. Being here was making me a little stressed, sure, but crazy? No, and I wouldn't let her think that. Melissa and I spent the rest of the day discussing the situation and listening for the noises. It seems they came at regular intervals, once every 10 minutes or so. I thought maybe we were near an automatic machine. Sometimes when they came, I would have flashes of terrible things. It was disgusting and wrong, but it happened. I couldn't help it. I wondered if Melissa had the flashes, but I didn't dare ask her. If my only companion thought I was crazy, well, I didn't think it would end well. We had thought it was some sort of hostage-taking at first. We thought we'd been taken captive by criminals. That's what we decided. It was a normal assumption. About 30 thumps into the day, though, our thoughts changed. We were hungry. If the thumps really were coming every 10 minutes, then 30 thumps meant we'd been awake for 5 hours. I could hear my stomach growling, and once I even heard Melissa's. We were thirsty more, though. My throat was sore and dry, but we had no water or food. We were talking about what we'd do when we got out of this box when it happened. The interviews and books and maybe even movies that would come. We could both get rich off this. We tried to remain positive like that. Suddenly, everything went black. It felt like only a second, and I didn't realize my eyes had closed until I opened them. Melissa and I woke up at the same time. We were confused. Somehow we'd blacked out at the same time, woken up at the same time, and...
Food.
Melissa whispered.
There's food and water.
She was staring into a corner of the room, where before there'd been nothing, but now there were 2 trays of food and water on them. My stomach rumbled, and I didn't care where they had come from or how we'd blacked out. Let's eat, I said, grabbing our trays. We can talk about it in a few thumps. Melissa actually laughed.
Funny how the way we measure time can change just like that,
she said, grabbing her food.
But I guess it's just as good as minutes or hours.
The food was good. Warm, steak and potatoes, a scoop of ice cream for dessert, a liter bottle of water to drink. The steak was pre-cut for us, so no knives. The forks we were given were dull, very dull. No way we could hurt anyone with them. Not that we would be able to regardless, since it seemed they could induce a loss of consciousness whenever they wanted to. I got the feeling that once we were done eating, we'd just black out again, and the forks and trays would be gone. We ate in silence, and then my guess was confirmed. We lost our trays and our forks, and again we were just in an empty concrete box. We never actually talked about it. We kept busy talking about other things. After another 50 or so thumps, we went to sleep. It was hard to sleep at first with the thumps, but as with anything, you grow accustomed to it. You grow accustomed to the thumps and the flashes and the blackouts, just as people grow accustomed to planes and phones and iPods. This is adaptation. This is evolution. I don't know how long we slept, but every day there seemed to be less time in between each thump. Each day, though, the food seemed to get a little better. The first day's food was good, but it seemed bland. Each day the food tasted better, as if a reward for losing time between thumps. This is conditioning. By day 10, there was barely any time between thumps. The food was delicious. We couldn't get enough. Melissa and I got along well enough. We were becoming pretty big friends. And at around day 5, we started having sex. We didn't love each other, but we were both adults. We both wanted something to keep us busy and entertained. Why not sex? Day 12, though, things took a turn. They went bad. We were eagerly awaiting lunch. We were ready for the blackout, ready to delight in the delicious food we'd come to expect. We weren't thinking about escape. We weren't thinking about anything. Thumps flashes food, thumps flashes food. The flashes had gotten worse, so much worse. The thumps came so fast now. The flashes were in my head all the time. Babies flayed open and dead. Dogs, limbs severed and laying in pools of blood. Cats with their eyes pulled out and their organs ripped from their abdomens. All just animals, dead animals. Their lives that had been so important before, now useless, now nothing, now just a heap of bloody regret. This is my future. This is the death of all. Thump. Darkness. When I awoke, I didn't smell food like I was used to. Melissa was already awake, crying. "What's the matter?" I asked her. "Why are you awake already?"
I didn't fall asleep this time,
she whispered.
They came in straight through the wall. They were so hideous. They...
She started to sob. "Calm down, Melissa," I said. I went to her and put my arm around her. She latched onto me weakly. "Tell me what happened."
They don't have mouths, Tom,
she cried.
They're not human. But the thumps come from their heads. We don't hear them with our ears, Tom. I never noticed before. but we hear them in our heads. Do you understand? They didn't bring food. They said that they'll keep bringing food from now on, but not today. They tried to tell me something else, but they had to stop thumping to talk to me. And once the thumping was gone, I didn't hear. I didn't want to. I begged them to stop, to bring it back. They stopped talking. They left.
This is necessary. I held Melissa until she stopped crying and fell asleep. I thought about the changes we had now. I was trying to comfort her, but all I could think about was that the flashes had stopped. I hadn't realized it until that moment because I was so used to the flashes accompanying the thumps that I had given myself flashes, but they weren't coming anymore, not really. Something had changed since mealtime, and now it made me almost uncomfortable. I could understand Melissa panicking when the thumping stopped now, though I didn't think I would have freaked out that badly. Melissa was crying.
I'm sorry, Tom.
She mumbled, pushing her face into my chest. I could feel her tears seeping through my shirt.
I should have been able to talk to them, but the thumps... It's so strange when they're gone. I'm used to them now.
I understood. I understood perfectly. We spent the rest of that day solemnly, talking not about what we would do when we got out, but possibly how we could get out. Things weren't normal. The thought that we might get out was beyond us now. We accepted that. We could live like this, at least for a while. Then one day, maybe in a month or a year, we might use our forks to dig into our wrists. Do they have thumps in heaven or hell, or whatever lies beyond? We got food the next day. The thumps continued, and the flashes remained silent. The food was better, and life was good again. Melissa, though, she was shaken. Maybe it was seeing our captors that had her so on edge. Maybe they put something in her head. The flashes, I thought. Is it possible they left my head and went to hers? Crazy, but crazier things had happened here. Every day, Melissa got more nervous, more agitated. I couldn't understand. I tried to talk to her about it, but she wouldn't answer my questions. She just looked at me and shook her head.
Nothing's wrong,
she would say.
I'm just tired.
This is denial. It happened on day 20. We fell asleep. We woke up and ate our food. We went about things as usual. I didn't know. If I had, I would have done something. Suffering alone is 1,000 times worse than suffering with a friend. I was finishing my dessert, and Melissa did it quick as lightning. She stabbed herself hard in one wrist, then the other. Then she shoved it in her mouth. She jammed it in her throat, pulling and pushing and grinding it in there, trying desperately to kill herself, to end it. One wrist was bright red, but it hadn't drawn blood. The other she'd stabbed harder, much harder, and it had holes in it. The holes were pretty deep, leaking, pouring blood. Blood was trickling out of her mouth, and when I threw my food down and reached out to stop her, she kicked me in the chest. I fell against the wall, and she just kept stabbing, cutting, choking with a fork. I didn't even realize I was screaming. The thumps had joined together by this point, making constant noise, and it was hard to hear over her. Eventually she slowed and tried to force the fork down her throat. She gagged and choked and retched, but it didn't come out. I got to her and pushed her arms away and reached in, but it was too far down at this point. Too far. My only companion, dying. She died quickly. Between the blood and the choking, I don't know what killed her. I didn't care. I cried the rest of that day. I felt like doing the same thing. I thought maybe I would the next day. Maybe I would join her again. At least I wouldn't be alone. The next day, however, didn't work out like that. I waited and waited. Eventually, the blackout came. I was eager to kill myself after a delightful meal. I just hoped I didn't mess it up. I'd hate to be half dead on the floor, pissing and shitting myself, alone for who knows how long. Fortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to mess it up. I woke up outside. It was dark. This wasn't right. No, I whispered. No one was in sight, but I could see the lights of a town in the distance. I was out. I'd made it out of my concrete prison. No. This is panic. This is change. I'm not ready for this. The thumps were gone, but things had changed. Adaptation. Conditioning. The thumps were gone. The flashes were back. Evolution. I wasn't used to the silence. It was driving me mad. The flashes didn't help. I knew what would make the flashes go away, though. The thumps. They would keep the flashes at bay, make me comfortable again. That was all I needed. And they'd been teaching me how to make the thumps. They'd been teaching me since day one. I just had to... I grimaced, not wanting to think about it. But I needed the thumps. What did I have to lose anyway? My only companion was gone. I stood and headed for the town in the distance.
I sigh at the sight of the open lake, a field of black liquid with waves that cling a sticky gel to the tips of my boots. The shores of the small beach are covered with a series of gray patterns, outlines of the waves that wash about. The sun's out, which is a surprise, both pleasant and disappointing. The warmth is a welcomed perk, though I'm always praying for precipitation. It rains on occasion. Some plant life still around by the looks of it. This lake area has been the first place in weeks in which I've seen a living tree. Perhaps they've only just come here in the last few days. I look upon the tree line at the opposite shore and I can see the larger portions of a city. It appears to be in ruins. I can see decayed towers and small clouds of smoke. From what I heard, the visitors hit the larger cities first. The survivalists I ran into on the road told me to head for the woodlands. I can't see why. The water lies just as black and dead here as it did in New York. The sun exposes the calm, tar-colored surface of the liquid body, reflecting the work of ravenous visitors. A drone flies overhead. I catch its orange trail of burned fuel as it flashes by. The mist of energy floats down on the surface of the sand next to me, singeing the branches. I turn away from the dead lake. I feel a tense dryness in my throat. I walk a trail different from the one I took to the shore. The path is lined with more trees, most being stripped of their colors and contents. Skeletal branches extend from torn and scratched trunks. Fallen leaves still paint the ground in a brown and tan slew. I spot scraps of metal and black dust about the woods. It's what the visitors leave behind with their drones and pods. I haven't spotted any large technology so far, yet I've been unable to encounter another living creature in the past few days. A slight pain begins to arise in my lower spine, which grows as my pack swings behind my shoulders. My watch died a few days ago due to near constant lack of sun. I'm left questioning how long I've been traveling. I'm about to sit for a rest, but a ringing nearby keeps me on my feet. I turn in circles twice. There's a scratchy, radio-like sound, one that spikes attention in my ears. After making another 360, I spot a small, tube-like device implanted in the woods, a bit off the path. A series of antennas extend from its upper end with a lower portion pinched into the soil. It's their technology, no doubt, but this device is unfamiliar. I'm curious to step closer, but moving even a few feet towards it makes the ringing twice as bad. The loud ring continues, sending an acute sting through my earlobes. I move forward on the path with quicker feet. A burning surges through the desert that is my throat. I glance back to see a final view of the tar lake with a gray forest lining each side of me. A sharp pain is now pulsing in my tailbone and I sense a familiar soreness in my feet. After a few more minutes of travel, I come across the red house. It's a surprising size with 2 floors, a porch on each end, and numerous windows lining the side that I can view. The structure is what I considered a lake house, an attractive home for a temporary resident. The path before me leads to the front porch, which holds a single white-colored door. I approach and I see that much of the brick red paint appears to be scraped and half of the windows are stained with a colored substance. Some are cracked. I stop when the door opens. I'm no more than 50 feet away from the deck when an older, white-bearded man stands in the doorway. He remains in the doorframe, holding a pistol in his right hand and keeping his left arm behind the wall. He appears to squint at the sight of me.
"Hold up,"
he shouts in a breathy, hoarse voice.
"Stay still. There are explosives about the ground where you stand and my fingers are right on the switch. Easy!"
I shouted back, holding up my arms and keeping calm to avoid tension.
"I'm not staying. I'm just passing through."
"What are you doing around here?
"Where'd you come from?" "I've walked from the city from the south. I left for safety, but I came here in search of water."
"Ain't no water here."
"They came and shit over it weeks ago. You should have known. You're the first human I've encountered in over a week. I don't have any sources to go by. Now, I don't want anything from you. I'm just going to walk back just in the direction behind me."
"The city? That's where you're coming from?"
"Lots of news about there. They saying the people are being possessed there or something."
"What's to say you're not one of them?"
"What do you mean?"
"One of them alien imposters. You here to trick me out, boy?"
"No, I don't know what you're speaking of. I haven't heard any news about observers." "Step around, slowly, into the yard to the left. My hand's still on the switch, so don't try any tricky shit."
I move, stepping towards an open, clear yard. I keep my hands up, though my eyes remain locked on the man. He glares at me, now aiming his pistol in my direction. I can't make out the specifics of his face, but his eyes are what intrigues me. They appear dark, abyssal. I want to sprint away, yet I'm not the one to gamble on caution.
"Right here?"
I say, stopping near the center of the field.
"Yes,"
the man says, moving his pistol down. Another drone flies by, in which I look to it. When I look back to the man, I see his head has remained still.
"So, what now? I think it's safe to say I'm not here to steal from you."
No, I suppose you're right." The man steps out of the doorframe and heads over to the edge of the deck. He shows a smile to me. I smile back, yet my hands move closer to the revolver in my pocket.
"Your hand's off the switch,"
I say, relaxing my hand.
"There weren't any explosives to begin with, were there?"
"You're right, boy," he says, nodding with a smile. His eyes are black indeed. They make me tremble. "You have nothing to worry about." A sting pierces the right side of my neck. With the cold entrance of the metallic surface, the object is removed before I can turn my head to look. I swing around, in which my vision is half as effective. The gray world around me becomes unclear as I see a blurred figure standing before me. After appearing a step back, it approaches with slow steps. I see a series of white flashes before my vision disappears. The world lies black, like tar. A pressure is placed on my wrists as well as my ankles. I hear the sound of faint clinks before opening my eyes, which ache as light floods over my lenses. The light comes from a window in front of me. I can see a view of the sunset on a tree line at the end of a field. A few more gray clouds have appeared since I was last outside. The room becomes clear, which appears to be rather simple. The walls are covered in a scratched green paint, sporting a flowery wallpaper that brings an iconic prettiness. To the left of me lies an aged, torn sofa, stained with a possible mold. To the right lies a splintered coffee table. A cracked plate rests as its center. I'm in a wooden chair with my legs restrained in front, arms behind. My limbs are clasped together with some form of metal cuffs. The sun reflects off the restraints. I make the initial tugs for freedom, which is met with an unsurprising defeat. I sense the restraints grip tighter as a larger strain is placed on my wrist and ankles as I finish struggling. You don't even know what you're trying to escape, a voice says from behind, calm in its approach. Before I turn my head back, a man steps in front of me. He appears middle-aged, dressed in a white coat, black slacks, and dark brown formal shoes. He has medical gloves on and is holding a small cylinder-shaped container. I look into his eyes, in which I'm struck with the coldness in my blood. Replacing his eyes are two pitched colored pools of black. They pulse with the nose, like they're about to bleed dark tears down onto my forehead. Don't be frightened. You're only late to what should have been done already. You don't have to suffer in this land anymore. He moves around me and begins running his fingers about my neck and head. He feels at my throat, temples, jaw, pulse, and at the tip of my spine. A chill pressure follows his fingers. Sorry I had to lure you in like that, boy, another voice says, approaching from behind. It belongs to the older man from before. He steps in front of the window. His eyes are indeed the same, casting the same nightmarish gaze that I imagined when I first saw him. I didn't mean to frighten or trick you. I just didn't expect to see someone like you. I thought our job was just about done. Your throat must be immensely dry, the middle-aged quote-unquote man says. How long have you gone without water? Hours? Days, perhaps? I haven't yet been able to study how long you can go without sustenance. Given the rapid loss of human life, I wouldn't suspect long. It's pitiful, really. That's what he was looking for when I saw him, the older one says. That's when I was sure he was human. The scanner picked him up even before then. You won't last out there much longer. We've drained most of this place. Then again, so have your people. I look about the room again and then out the window. The sunset's just beginning to fade. Who are you? I ask in a shaky voice. Please tell me, what is happening? Acceleration, the middle-aged one says. We've sped up the little time that's left on nature's clock. Now that this place is dying, we're taking and saving what we can. A few others are like you, running in panic. Almost everyone's out now, and you will be as well. The middle-aged one steps in front of me again and opens the container. Inside the case is a small metal clasp object combined with a form of syringe. A micro-point lines at the end of the narrow piece, one that feeds into a gray dust-like substance. I only have a second to examine it before the man moves behind me. With the object in one hand, I only have a second to examine it before the man moves behind me with the object in hand. Wait! Wait! I shout, tugging at my restraints as they continue to grow tighter. My ankles and arms grow numb from the pressure. What's that? Relax, the man says, his voice no louder than a whisper. If I explain to you, it would only unnerve you more. Do not struggle. There's no need to escape from rescue. No, stop! What are you doing? For years now, you have lived on nothing but an imminent grave. You all have. We have foreseen this and we have come. Now close your eyes. The pain will be unusual, but short. I don't listen. I start to breathe relentless air, shaking like mad. The older one starts to speak, but his words fly over me. A pinch goes through the back of my neck, in which the rest of my body is shot with a strange, chilling energy. I lose all sense of my limbs. You'll sleep for a while, but you'll wake up soon. I look up to the window as color begins to fade from my vision. I see the open field as a sheer gray. I begin to spot large, sphere-shaped structures beginning to descend upon the field and beyond. They cast beams of light on the field and surrounding woods. My vision goes black. The dryness in my throat subsides. I sense a thick, slow-moving liquid begin to bleed away from my eyes.
It happened when I was 5. I was running around a playground, enjoying the summer like most little kids my age. I would chase my friends around the swing set, and then we'd all pile onto the slide, trying to make it to the bottom together. Our mothers watched from the benches, chatting with each other and keeping a watchful eye on our activity. I remember we were playing tag when I heard the dog barking. I stopped and wiped sweat from my forehead, gasping in air, hands on my grass-stained knees. Behind the playground was a patch of forest, an undeveloped plot of land. There was a dog biting at something just inside the tree line. I could hear the cries of pain from whatever the mutt was attacking. I had a soft spot for animals, and so I quickly bolted over and swatted the dog on the nose, scolding it and telling it to shoo. It was foolish of me, and I was lucky the dog didn't attack me. Instead, it whimpered and looked at me with sad brown eyes before running away. I turned my gaze to what the dog had been so interested in. My eyes went wide as they settled on the creature. It was small, maybe 2 feet tall, and covered with strange greenish skin. It had 2 arms and legs like a person, but its face was bloated, and its 2 white eyes rolled around to look at me. It reminded me of a frog. I threw a look over my shoulder and gave my mom a reassuring wave. She had been calling me. She smiled and turned back to her conversation. I returned my attention to the strange creature as it was pulling itself off the ground to stand on its 2 webbed feet. I asked if it was okay, and to my amazement, it nodded. I noticed it was clutching something in its hand. It looked like a cluster of red ribbons. Strangely, they floated up from its grip to disappear into the air. I examined them, watching the way they fluttered in the summer breeze, trying to understand how they seemingly faded into nothing. It was like the creature was holding a bunch of invisible balloons, and I could only see the strings. I pointed to the ribbons and asked what they were. In my mind, this creature was just another magical discovery on the path to adulthood. I had no idea that my situation wasn't normal. I didn't know that eerie frog creatures weren't part of the natural order of things. The tiny frogman looked towards where I was pointing, at his plume of ribbons, and then back at me. I could see intelligence behind its strange, puffy eyes. It opened its mouth and spoke.
The clouds are hollow.
Its voice was raspy and strained, like it was speaking in my language for the first time. I didn't know what it meant, what meaning the words held. And so I cocked my head and asked. It shook its handful of ribbons at me, their shiny red texture drifting from its grasp and fading into the gentle air. The clouds are hollow, it repeated, clearly stressing every syllable. I giggled, unsure what else to do. It raised a 3-fingered hand and pointed to the distant horizon and the direction the ribbons were blowing. Clouds are coming. I was about to ask it another question, but my mom was calling me. I turned back to the frog creature and told it I had to go, but that it could come play with me if it wanted. It just stared at me, its eyes rolling over my face. It seemed like it was surprised I could see it. I waved a hand at it as I went back to my friends. I told them about my discovery, but when I pointed toward the tree line to show them my new pal, the creature was gone. Later that night, as I crawled into bed, listening to my parents talk from their bedroom, I heard something outside my window. It sounded like something was tapping the glass. I took a quick peek towards my door and then scuttled towards the window. I peered out into the darkness, looking for the source of the sound. Our house was only a single story, and so my view was filled with the backyard. A full moon glowed overhead, a golden badge on the dark fabric of night. And there was the strange frogman. His small 2-foot frame was outlined by the moon's white rays, its hand clasping the strange red ribbons. They looked longer now, though, as they flapped in the silent air. Earlier, they had disappeared mere inches from its fist, but now they blustered in the wind, 3 feet in length. I quietly opened my window and called out to the creature softly. It approached me without hesitation, as if it had expected me. I asked it what it was doing here. Its voice slid from its green lips like wet silk. Stay by me. The hollow clouds are coming. I looked over my shoulder and saw the shadow of my parents' door close along the hallway wall. They were going to sleep. I pulled myself up onto the windowsill and over the other side. My bare feet crunched down on the dead grass. The frogman pointed to his ribbons, which were visibly growing, climbing up into the sky like empty leashes. The thing motioned me to follow it, and I did without question. It was just so strange and exciting. This bizarre friend I had made. It led me around the house and into the cul-de-sac of my neighborhood, where my house resided. I looked around at the other dark homes, hoping none of my neighbors saw me out here. I'd be in big trouble if they did. Something tugged at my hand, and I saw the frogman pointing towards the sky, urgently. Look! The empty clouds. Sure enough, overhead, Massive black clouds rolled across the empty sky. They were tall, like thunderheads, but that's where the similarities stopped. The clouds had cracks and holes in them, like hard-boiled eggs, and a strange red light emitted from the insides. My eyes widened in the night as I gazed up into their interior. White, bony ribs filled the dark clouds, lining the walls like gutless carcasses. Black ooze hung from the ebony formations of fractured cotton, and it reminded me of weeping willows. The silent masses chugged across the sky far above, looming over the neighborhood and blacking out the moon. Red light pulsed from the holes in the enclosed clouds, illuminating quick glances at the ribs inside. Drifting out of the bottom of the clouds were the red ribbons. I traced them down the sky, hundreds of feet, and saw that the strange creature was holding the other ends in his grip. "Take my hand," the frogman urged. I quickly grasped its three-fingered hand, surprised at how warm it was. No sooner had I done so than the clouds began to open up like gaping jaws. I saw the ribbons go taut in the creature's fist, and he adjusted his grip, his eyes trained in concentration at the evolving display. As the clouds opened, the ribs parted like teeth, and I felt the air swirl around me. My hair whipped up into my face, and I pushed it aside, my eyes wide and my heart racing in my chest. The clouds looked like dark, hungry mouths. Suddenly, floating out from the rooftops of my neighbors' houses, were the glowing forms of people. I gasped as I recognized them, encased in a soft red glow, eyes closed, and gently drifting up to the waiting maw. I cried out, turning around, and saw the forms of my parents drift out of my house and up into the sky. They looked like they were asleep and completely unaware of what was happening. I tried to run to them, panic suddenly erupting in my chest. But the frogman held me tight. I begged him to let me go, but he shook his bloated head violently. "Not you. Not you," it kept saying, struggling to maintain its grip on both me and its strange nightmare balloons. I watched in horror as the people continued to rise up into the sky, higher and higher, until they finally entered the waiting jaws. One by one, the clouds closed, once again forming dark, broken spheres in the night. Every single person who had been pulled up from their home was now trapped, unaware, inside the rolling black thunderheads. Tears rolled down my face as fear churned my insides. In confused horror, I watched as the red ribbons slowly began to disappear again. They faded from the clouds into invisibility the closer they got to the frogman's fist. After what seemed like forever, the creature let me go, his other hand clutching only inches of ribbon now. Crying, I asked him what he had done to my friends, my family. I demanded it, taking a step towards it in defiance. The thing raised a hand at me, trying to settle my hysterics. It's okay. I took only... It seemed to struggle to find the right words. I took their after dead. I cried harder, begging him to release all the people. It shook its small head at me, its mouth a thin green line. The hollow clouds need your peoples after dead. If not, its eyes filled with a quiet fear. If not, I lose control, and they will never go away. The ribbons will be broken, uncontrolled. The jaws will never stop eating. I didn't understand any of this at the time. I didn't know what he was talking about. I just knew I wanted to get away from the frogman and the strange, horrible nightmare balloons it held. Look. The frogman pointed to the sky. They're leaving. I trained my head up and saw the towering black clouds begin to fade. Their great ribbed walls slowly starting to drift higher and higher up into the air, carried in the night towards the horizon. I looked back at the small creature next to me and saw it was still clutching the now tiny red ribbons. I wondered what would happen if he ever let them go. Goodbye, little one, the thing suddenly said. It took one last look at me, and then began walking across the street towards the woods. I didn't watch as it disappeared into the night, but instead turned and sprinted back to my house, convinced I would find my parents gone. As I crashed back through my window and tore down the hallway, I prayed I wasn't alone. I prayed harder than I ever had. I banged open my parents' bedroom door, and to my utter relief, I saw them both jump up in their bed, the noise jolting them from slumber. I climbed up with them, weeping, babbling about what I had just seen, about what I had just been through. They shushed me with loving compassion and told me I just had a bad dream. They told me they were here for me. It's been 20 years since that night. I haven't forgotten a single detail of the horrors I witnessed. But some of the terror has gained clarity since then. I have no rational explanation for what happened. I don't have any resolution to the fear that's held me for decades. But as the years have advanced, I've begun to wonder. I've begun to wonder what will happen to my parents when they die. I wonder where their souls will go. And even more terrifying, if the hollow clouds return. Will the little frogman remember my kindness and save me a second time?
Chilling tales for dark nights.